It's that time of the month. It's time for another Model Railroad Q&A. I've got a bunch of questions to answer, so let's get right to it. This video is brought to you with support from Trains.com. You can use the promo code JimmyDIY to get $10 off your order of $50 or more. You can check them out at the link in the description. Hey everybody, my name's Jimmy. Welcome to Coffee and Trains today. I'm just drinking some Donut Shop coffee. If you want to tell me what kind of coffee you are drinking and have it featured just like these guys right here, you can do that in the comments below, and who knows, you might see your name pop up on an episode of Coffee and Trains. Also, this is my monthly Q&A, so if you want to have your question answered on next month's Q&A, which we're doing something special for that I will tell you about at the end of this video, you can leave that in the comments, and we will try and get to all of those here. Cheers. Amanda Adams 1976 asks, how much track space do they need for a 2-foot incline in HO/00 scale? Well, this is a matter of figuring out the grade that you want. Now, first of all, we need to decide what grade we want on that track, which is the percentage incline. And I like to not go past 2%, especially on what is going to be a long run like this. So we're going to look at 2% here. Now, figuring out the grade is rise over run. So we know the rise, which is 2 feet, but we don't know the run. But we do know what percentage, so 2%. So let's do rise, which is 2 feet, over the grade, which is at 2%, which is 0.02. And when you do that math, the 2 divided by 0.02, you're going to get 100. And that's going to be a 100-foot length of track to go up 2 feet at a 2% grade. Now, to do that, you're probably going to want to utilize something like a helix if you're going to be going up 2 feet. That's going to be your best option, but that's typically how you do it. Grade is rise over run, and what I would do is just do your rise divided by the grade that you want, and that'll tell you how much run, how much length of track you need. BC5441 says, how about brass steam locomotives for my railroad excursion operations on my new railroad I'm designing? Well, it's something that I've definitely been considering. I think I want at least one brass locomotive on my layout, specifically a brass steam engine. It's just a matter of finding them in scale. They're out there, they're just a little bit hard to find. Ryan the Rail fan asked, how is the Scale Train's SD40-2? They asked if it was any good and they recommend buying one, but they've heard some things about it, like it gets caught on the track and it has some of the unglued details, and he asked whether I should go for Kato or look at Broadway Limited. Well, I do own a Scale Train's SD40-2, and it is a beautiful locomotive, and it is very prototypically accurate. However, if you do have some uneven spots where you have some track that could catch on it, it might catch. Mine did catch on a couple spots, and I had to ended up fixing those spots of track, but I haven't had any issues with the ungluing. One thing I also like about it is that it has the Microtrains compatible couplers, unlike the rest of Scale Train stuff as far as I know, so that's a really nice thing. I also have Kato and Broadway Limited. It's a big year for SD40-2s and in-scale because Scale Trains, Broadway Limited, Kato, Intermountain, and I think Bachman announced some too. There's a lot of SD40-2s out there right now. And right now, it's really close between Scale Trains and Broadway Limited for like the best overall in terms of detail and performance. I would say that Broadway Limited edges it out, and overall it's going to just like plop on the track and go. If you're looking to build a fleet though, and you can get a hold of enough of them, Scale Trains is going to have more road numbers, and their detail is a little bit higher because that's their thing. The rivet counters, they are prototypically accurate, and you're going to get some ones specific to certain road names and eras. So yes, it does have a little bit of that catch issue. I don't consider that a deal breaker. It may just mean that you need to do a little bit of work on your track on some spots. But yeah, the Broadway Limited one overall, I think, edges it out slightly right now. James Thomas 7724 asks, what's the best way to determine how many cars I can operate on my railroad? I'm in the process of writing out waybills for all my cars, and I'm using the Micromark car routing system, but he thinks he has too many cars. Well, first of all, you can never have too many cars. That's ridiculous. No one can ever have too many cars. But what I say for actual operations is if you're looking for a number specifically to get, I would look for 2 cars for every industry slot that you have on your layout or yard slot that you need to for your operations. That way you can do a 100% swap out when you do an operation. You can have every siding full and then bring in stuff and completely swap them out with your switch list and do that. So I always say having twice as many cars as you do spots, and also make sure they're the type of cars that need to go in those spots. But that's where I would start, and obviously then just keep on going. I've got way more than the amount of cars that I need, and sometimes it's also fun to have cars that you can just fit into a manifest freight that if you have the room on your layout, it can just run on by. So it really depends, but I think the bare minimum is usually just having double the amount of cars you need to fill every spot. Drew Huff 3457 asks, what is a good fast clock ratio for HO scale train layout operation? Now, for those of you that don't know, fast clocks are basically ways that when you operate with timetables or something similar, that you can have a clock that tells you what the timetables are, and they're a clock that goes and it's a normal time, but it moves a lot faster. And the most common ratios I would say to go for is either 5-to-1 or 6-to-1 in terms of speed on that. So 5 times as fast or 6 times as fast is usually what people are going to go for when they're operating. That's the most common ones. He also asked, do you need extra power for electric flow on a 20 or 30 foot layout? It really depends on how many trains you have running at the same time, and you just need to go in and see how many amps you can provide versus how many locomotives you can go. If you're HO scale, I like to safely say like 1 to 1.5 amps per locomotive. That's going to give you a nice cushion, so that'll tell you how many amps that you will need. So you might need some boosters, it just depends. Thomas L. Durbin has a couple of questions. His first one is, which company makes the strongest units in your opinion, as in which one to pull the most and have the best electrical connection? Well, I think that pulling the most and having the best electrical connection are kind of going to go hand in hand, but it also depends on how the systems are built. I think that locomotives that have the best wiring between the pickups and the motors are going to do that. So any locomotive that has a hardwired connection is going to do better than one that's relying on something like contact strips, although there are plenty that use contact strips and run fantastically. Also, locomotives that have heavier bodies, think die-cast and other metal bodies that are heavier and are going to be able to put more weight on the rails, are going to be stronger in terms of pulling, especially when you have larger, heavier locomotives, think bigger steamers that have also traction tires and things like that. If they're big, heavy, and metal, they're probably going to be able to pull more than a locomotive with just simply the metal chassis and the plastic body. You're probably going to see more of that. Like, for instance, the Y6B I have can pull like crazy. So that is probably what you're going to go with. I wouldn't say it's a company that makes them. I would say it just depends on the locomotive type. There are companies that make, Kato makes a big boy that can pull a lot, but they also make the pocket line steeple cab, which it cannot pull a lot. So it's really not by company, it's really by locomotive type. And your second question is, will I be in Greensburg train show in Richmond, Virginia in January? I don't think I can make that. I'm just getting to the point where I'm going to start traveling more for train shows, maybe in the next 2 years, once my kids get a little older and they can travel easier with me, so I can take them around. So that's really what I'm thinking about. Especially, I want to be able to start traveling to train shows when the NMRA show comes to Chattanooga, which is fairly close to me. Cybersnaps asked me a question about JMRI. It says their club is interested in using JMRI, but they do train shows in locations without Wi-Fi, and could they use a Wi-Fi router to create an offline local area network to run JMRI? Absolutely, yes, you could. I have seen that done before at train shows with several different clubs, where they'll have an entire setup where they have their Y-throttle server set up in the middle of it, and it'll be running everything. So 100% absolutely yes, you could do it. Carlos Chapas says that they have an NCE power cab on their N-scale railroad, and they have decoders with functions for F29 on them, but the functions on his power cab only go up to F28. So how does he use function F29? Well, the functions past F28 are fairly new, and that makes me think that you probably have some sort of ESU Loc Sound decoder in there, because they have decoders. I think Loc Sound 5 can go up to 32 functions, but I haven't been able to find another decoder that goes up to that many functions. So I think it's just a matter of technology catching up. We're seeing a lot of that with ESU and N-scale, where they're coming out with new mounts and things like that. So I think it's just a matter of it slowly catching up. So Yeah, you can't really access those functions past 28 with NCE PowerCab as far as I know. If someone knows a way to do that, please put it in the comments below. Trainmaster I6S asks, when are you going to show off your viewers' layouts again? Which I actually just did. This question was earlier. I do those every month, usually the third, or if it's got 5 Thursdays, fourth Coffee and Trains of every month, the Viewer Model Railroad Show. So if you want to submit those, you can send your photos and video to the email in the description below. Just make sure you include an entire picture of your whole layout or most of your layout, depending on how big it is. So I actually had 2 questions that were pretty close to the same. Darth Maul Vader 22, that's an interesting name for all you Star Wars fans out there. And Kartoffelgeist asked about a DC controller and what they're looking for. But if you're going to look for the easiest DC controller that's going to be out there, that's probably the most widely used, is probably going to be something like the MRC 1300. That's just going to be a great one. I have one just in a box if I ever need it. These are just, they've been around forever. They're very well built and they work great. MRC makes some of the best DC controllers that you can get out there. And Matt Trains asks, where's the best place to buy HON 30? The best place I found is really probably Train World. They have a whole selection where you can go there. And Bachmann actually has a really wide selection of HON 30. Bachmann does a good job with some of the narrow gauge variants on there, but definitely check out Bachmann and Train World for HON 30. I'm definitely considering an HON 30, so definitely look there. That's where I'm looking. Matthews69420 says they're about to start in model railroading and they're trying to figure out what scale to use. They want to try TT or N, and HO is kind of big for their space. Well, if I'm being blunt, I wish that TT gauge was more popular in the States. There is some American stuff with TT, but it's really more of a European one. So if you're in Europe, I think TT is a great balance between N and HO scale. If you're in the US, you're going to have an easier time finding stuff in N scale that you want. So I think that TT has the potential to be more frustrating in terms of finding products that you need versus N scale. It's probably the second most, I think it is the second most widely available scale behind HO scale. So I would probably, if you're starting out, look at N scale. Unless you're in the European market, you didn't say where you were, then probably TT is going to be more available. Bobby Ryan19347 asks, how high are the mountain ranges on the layout behind you, and what would you change about the layout, if anything? So first of all, this layout is going away. I'm building a new layout, so you'll be seeing me stripping that layout fairly soon. But the mountain range, I think, is about 18 inches high at its highest. It may go a little bit higher. I can't remember exactly. The one thing that I would change is the grade on the back side that comes down. Because of the way that I built it, I originally intended just to be a smaller layout, and I decided to expand it in the last second. I'd already laid the track for the first section, and I couldn't do this, but I would move the double crossover more towards where my East Valley industrial area is and have a longer downslope from the mountain and try to get it down to about 2% versus the 4% it was at. That's probably the biggest thing that I would change. Chris Barr 1359 asked if I have a recommendation for a good soldering iron. And what I've been using for the past few years, and it has been the best soldering iron I've ever used, is the AU 9378. Now, it's a little bit pricey, but it is fantastic. It's got its own separate station. I've used cheap soldering guns for a while before that, and it just wasn't that great. The AU one is just fantastic. You can dial in the temperature exactly. They have a kind of a budget version of it, the 9378 Plus. I'm going to link both of these in the description below. Definitely check them out. I've been extremely happy with them. It's very easy to swap out and change and do maintenance on them, and AU has a ton of maintenance items that you can get as well. So they're very easy to take care of. They're going to last you a long time. These are very good soldering irons. Plains and More YouTube asked me, how much would you say is too much for a DCC locomotive? Well, for non-sound DCC, which you can get, I would say 200 is too much, is the max for non-sound DCC, unless it's a really high detail item that's been really taken a lot to manufacture, or it's a rare item that's that kind of run. For sound, it depends on what it is. Obviously, your steam engines are going to cost more, so I'm including steam in this. I would say 400 to 450 is the limit for me, and spinning with some notable exceptions, things like big boys and articulated locomotives that are going to be like the prize pieces of a collection. I would go as high as 5 to 600, and this is not including stuff like brass locomotives and things like that. So I would say like the absolute ceiling for me in terms of buying, with very few exceptions right now, is about $600 is the most that I think I have spent, and it took a while of saving up to get that and planning with that. So, but most of the time I'm not going to spend more than $250 on a locomotive, and I buy a lot of DCC ready for this reason. It allows me to get a lot of locomotives for a lot lower price because I have no problem putting in my own decoders. Okay, if you want to get in questions for me to answer in next month's Q&A, you can put that in the comments below, and I'm going to do something a little bit special for next month. I'm going to do what's called an AMA, and Ask Me Anything. This is basically, you can ask me almost any topic that you can think of. Now, I may not answer some of them for various reasons. That'll probably be obvious, but you can ask me anything that you want. It'll be a fun thing to do towards the end of the year here. It's just, it'll be fun. I've always wanted to do an AMA, and I think since I already do these Q&A sessions, having an AMA Q&A, that's a lot of letters, would be a great way to round out the year. So definitely get your questions in now. You can ask me questions about anything, and I will do my best to answer them if they are reasonable questions. So in the meantime, check out some of these model railroad businesses. Trains in the Valley is a model train shop located in Pennsylvania. They sell new and used model trains with a mission to make trains accessible to everyone. You can check them out at trainsinthevalley.com, link in the description. Scaletree.com. Scaletree.com makes hero and forest trees for HO and N-scale. They also do custom trees for custom orders. Check them out at scaletree.com. I have linked some of the videos that I talked about stuff in this video right here. You can check those out right here. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, drink some coffee, and happy railroading.